This week on The Record, a clash in the capital city. Missouri lawmakers confront the will of the voters.
This is exactly what our founders were expressly against.
This was a big issue, and nobody came to me until Wednesday of last week.
Caught in between the courtroom and jail cell. When can the scales of justice imprint a scarlet letter on people presumed innocent? How the rapid expansion of a tool meant to reduce jail populations turned into a digital shackle. St. Louis has a new mayor.
And welcome to our city's next chapter.
What we're learning from exit polls and what's in store at City Hall. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. It's a new era in St. Louis. Tuesday, Kara Spencer swore the oath of office, becoming the city's 48th mayor. She brings almost a decade of experience as an alderwoman into the city's top job. During her speech, she outlined 4 big goals to make city government more open, the people safer, the streets cleaner, and the population bigger.
We're going to be looking at transparency and accountability, opening the mayor's office, having some constructive conversations with members of the community leaders, et cetera. We're going to be moving forward with some accountability with regards to city services. That is critically important, how we deliver city services, improving those.
Joining us now with fresh insight and analysis, looking into exit polling data, is political science professor David Kimball from the University of Missouri St. Louis, a colleague of a friend of ours, Anita Mannion.
Yes.
Good to have you with us, and congratulations on the exit polling. I understand, first of all, that a lot of students at UMSL helped go out in the field and gather all this data from people who had just cast a ballot. So that's when these ideas are most fresh on their mind.
Yep, that's why we call it an exit poll. These were students in my class, and then we recruited other UMSL students to help us out on election day.
Let's dig into the numbers, but before we do, when you look at all this, what was the biggest impression that you were left with?
I think 2 things. One, there's a clear racial divide in the city in terms of which voters supported which candidate, and 2, that the election was a referendum on Mayor Jones's performance, and voters in general had kind of a sour evaluation of her performance.
So if you look at the total breakdown of the voters that cast ballots, 54% were white, 39% were black, 7% described themselves as another race. Of the black voters, 23% voted for Kara Spencer, 76% for Tashara Jones. That was a widening gap. It was closer than that in the primary. It tells you, at least from the data that we can.
And in the primary, voters could select multiple candidates.
So we saw a polarization there in those last 5 weeks.
Right, and I think when you look at the turnout numbers, they were higher in South City, in the majority white neighborhoods in South City, than they were in North City. So that helped Spencer win by such a wide margin.
And if you had any wonder why Kara Spencer ran a campaign so heavily on snow removal and trash removal, your poll found that 94% of people who voted in the city say that sometimes, often, or always, trash and snow removal is a problem in their neighborhood. What did that tell you?
Right, and that those voters who said it was a problem most frequently voted heavily for Spencer over Mayor Jones. So,
You saw that, 72% of the people that said always, they broke for Kara Spencer, and it goes down the list, 66% who said often they voted for Kara Spencer. So she had a winning message and she stuck with it, is what this poll seems to indicate.
Right, that the voters were unhappy with city services, trash and snow in particular. For a challenger, that's a pretty easy message to focus on.
I like what this poll did because you also didn't just look past and analyze the incumbent, but you looked forward and said, what are some of the issues facing the state and the local government? The tightest thing on here was a bit shocking because it was one of the most contentious moments during the debate over how to enforce traffic violations. Do we bring back red light cameras? The Board of Aldermen has already voted to do this,
right? But
it looks like the mayor has a challenge here. The tightest issue of any poll, 51-49. 51 said yes, 49 said no. First of all, what goes into asking a question like this? What kind of can you tell us anything more about the kind of responses you got?
Well, the credit goes to my students because they proposed most of the questions for the survey, and many of them were interested in current issues facing the city, like this one about red light cameras. I mean, it's been a divisive issue in the past because of the enforcement, because people get a ticket in the mail and they don't know about it and they're unhappy. So I suspect the close division on yes or no to bring back the red light cameras reflects some of that past.
Well, thanks for breaking down this data for us and gathering it all in the first place. A lot of work, I know, goes into work like this, so thank you to you and to your students who are out there in the streets at the polling places and precincts. David Kimball, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And also joining us now in studio for reaction to the election night and the results and the reset at City Hall is Alderman Rasheen Aldridge from the 14th Ward in North City, representing part of downtown. Good to have you with us here in studio.
Thanks for having me.
You talked about in a press release that you issued just after a possibility for a major reset at City Hall. What do you see in the offings in the future for the city of St. Louis with this new leadership in the mayor's office, but the same Board of Aldermen, except for Joe Vollmer? But what do you see as the potential for the future of the city here?
I mean, I think it's an opportunity for everyone to reset, for cooler heads to finally cool down. You know, we had a very intense election cycle, kind of a rematch between former Mayor Jones and also Alderwoman Spencer. I think now that that's over, it's an opportunity for us to say, okay, we picked sides, either you're on a winning side or losing side, but at the end of the day, it's a winning side for the people of the city of St. Louis. So, you know, we've worked with Alderwoman Spencer. She's been at the board with several alders, including myself, for several years. So now it's just time to get down to work and figure out how we can come to common ground to move the city forward.
You talked about in your statement your realization that you are the last remaining black man alderman on the Board of Aldermen there. What is it, and we see in this exit polling that there is a clear racial divide in the city. Kara Spencer seems to have lost a bit of support that she had in the primary. In the general election. There was a hardening there in those numbers. What do you think, what do you understand her promises to be to North City, to black voters in particular? She mentioned in her inaugural address that those barriers that divide us are barriers to our city's progress. What can she do, what should she do to overcome or help heal any of those divides?
You know, not only being the only black man at the Board of Aldermen, I also have a very unique ward. So I have, part of my ward is downtown, but majority of it is North St. Louis. And as I've been out just as an alderman for the last several years, but also as I was out knocking doors for candidates, people feel like that their voice, especially in North St. Louis, is not being heard. It feels like that we get catered to when it's election time, but we're not really seeing results. And I think it's not just the results. People need to see their elected officials on a regular basis, not just when election time comes. So I think there's a huge opportunity for Alderwoman Spencer to partner with the Northside Alders to actually come to those town halls, to actually come to meetings in the ward. I will say, even though I supported Mayor Jones, I think that was something that she lacked a little bit, is being seen not just on the big grand press conferences of what's going on in the city, but being there on the neighborhood level and hearing people. When people see you and they feel like you are listening to them, it goes a very long way. So I think it's an opportunity for Alderwoman Spencer to work with black leadership. We want to work with her and work with black leadership to figure out how do we move Northside forward together.
All right, Alderman Rasheen Aldridge, he was not on your ballot this November, but he could be in 2 years. You running again?
I am.
Look at that. We have an announcement.
Already, early.
Breaking news here on the record. Alderman Aldridge, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We're back in a moment. A colorful protest erupted in the Missouri Capitol this week after House Republicans advanced a bill trying to overturn abortion rights in the Missouri Constitution. Abortion advocates plan to stage rallies across the St. Louis area. Reacting to it, House Bill H.R. Resolution 73 could reinstate a near-total abortion ban in Missouri with narrow exceptions. This coming just 5 months after Missouri voters overwhelmingly passed Amendment 3, rolling back the previous ban.
The Missouri legislature takes it upon themselves to undo that and to undermine the will of the voters. It doesn't matter who's in charge. If we set that precedent, does that continue?
So I want to terminate this other person's life because it's inconvenient for me. I don't think most people in the state of Missouri line up in that position.
If the Senate approves this House bill, it could go to voters in November 2026. Senate Democrats blocked a second effort to overturn the will of the voters on paid sick leave and the minimum wage. Republicans worked to undermine that amendment, running into a 9-hour filibuster on the Senate floor. 57% of Missouri voters approved Prop A in November, requiring most employers to provide paid sick time starting May 1st. A Republican-sponsored bill would block it.
This is one of those things of the problem with direct democracy. The people casting the ballots for measures such as this, they have no skin in the game whatsoever when it comes to these sorts of measures. No realization of the detriment or the harm that it may cause to their very own bottom dollar, because they may not even understand what these provisions, what these measures would do to their employer.
I, along with the other Senate Democrats, were honored to stand up for the will and the wishes of Missouri voters. Proposition A, Senate Democrats are working closely with the bill sponsor to try to come up with some solution where we can still make sure we're treating Missouri workers and working families with respect and dignity, but also acknowledging that the employers have some concerns.
That Republican bill would also freeze minimum wage hikes after next year. Are electronic ankle monitors a bail reform breakthrough or just a digital prison? New York Times reporter Taylor Tiamoyo-Harris sits down with us next. In this country, we're all presumed innocent until proven guilty. But in St. Louis, more and more people accused of low-level crimes are finding that presumption of innocence comes with a catch: a GPS ankle monitor that tracks their every move before they've ever had a chance to stand trial. Some critics might compare it to a digital shackle that could upend your life, strain your job or your family, perhaps raise serious questions about equity or accountability in our court system. A recent New York Times investigation revealed how a growing number of defendants, still legally innocent, are being ordered to wear these GPS ankle monitors as a condition of their release. It's at that intersection of justice, technology, and power where that presumption of innocence meets the politics of control. Joining us now is Taylor Tiamoyo-Harris, who reported out that story for the Times, certainly news that was fit to print in this instance, as the Times motto is there. Thank you for joining us, and congrats on being published in a national publication. That's pretty cool.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for having a newspaper reporter on TV. I'm excited.
We're big fans. We're big fans. Certainly go get the paper if you haven't seen it already. That story is out there, and it's worth the read. But it really reveals that in the last few years, the vast majority of people who've been placed on these monitors, they wouldn't have stayed in jail under the old system. Your story kind of paints a picture of what might have been a well-intended ankle monitoring program, perhaps quietly shifting to this alternative to incarceration, but almost looking more like a pretrial form of punishment. In your conversations with defendants, attorneys, judges, what were the stories that stuck with you most?
I would say initially what stuck with me the most was what I saw firsthand in the courthouse when we have a number of people being placed on GPS monitors. It seemed at times that it was the default. That's what we initially asked prosecutors, because every time I was in court, it was like the recommendation if someone was granted bail. They ultimately said no, but looked at other data, observations, and it seems that it seems like it's scaled back though. But I will also say that I did talk to victims, survivors of crime, and how they felt about GPS, because they matter in this situation as well. And some of them didn't feel as though GPS really protected them. I talked to a mother whose son committed violence against her, and she said she didn't feel as though this was really helping. His monitor was actually assigned to an abandoned building.
One of the things that stands out to me, talking to public defenders or attorneys, defense attorneys, they'll sometimes describe the pretrial status as something that judges or the court systems are trying to race through to get to the big thing, the trial. And I don't know if you found that the speed itself, that in that speed, judges or the court system just found this safe default where they felt like, hey, we can trust this. It's one of the reasons I like your story. It provokes that assumption. It says, wait a minute, maybe this is also harmful.
I did reach out to judges. I did go to a number of trials, bond hearings more so, and judges overwhelmingly, they relied on GPS monitors to me as a sense of control, and that's also what attorneys told me. It made them feel safer, about letting people out on bond. But sometimes, again, they said that they understood the harms. Actually, most recently, last month, I went to court, and a judge decided ultimately, like, hey, I don't think we're going to put you on a monitor because it's going to cause more problems than it creates, so.
You mentioned themes of poverty and parenthood. There was one case where the monitor upended the life of Kyla Mason. She lost her job. She was evicted while she was pregnant. Under a cash bail system, she might have faced those same scenarios or worse. It seems the ankle monitor might have been a way to try to ease her out of that cash bail system. But then something about it carries a stigma, it seems, is what your story is suggesting, that the wearing this thing around. You even highlighted someone who had to plug theirs into a wall and be tethered to a wall. I mean, that was a very evocative image that you painted there.
Right, so starting first with Kyla, even her attorney himself, and I talked to other attorneys who said she likely would have been granted a cash bail. So she wouldn't have had these rules and restrictions prior to the reform that started happening according to that mandate in 2019. If she couldn't come up with the money, right? Right, if she couldn't come up with the money. So you're talking about employment discrimination. Okay, well, yeah, employers carry the bias, but the monitors carry the stigma, right? So if someone has a monitor on and they go and their employers and coworkers are looking down at their monitor, you don't know if that creates a factor. We had an example in the store. We had a contractor who said, hey, they don't want to hire people who they're scared of. People see the monitor on my leg, but you're expected to be in society and be a productive member of society and, maintain employment, but sometimes it is a barrier.
Mm-hmm. And if I understand, I think the monitors were something that were provided to people upon their parole from jail at first, and then they became this alternative to jail in the beginning. One of the men you interviewed talked about the psychological toll of that constant surveillance, the idea that maybe there's a technical violation just around the corner if this thing runs out of a battery. Was that a pattern that you encountered in your interviews, and how are people handling that stress?
How are they handling? They're counting the days till they get the monitor off, to be honest. Some of them do not handle it well. Some of them talk about the psychological stress of monitors, just having the violations on their mind. They don't know if a violation is pending or over their head, if they're going to get sent to jail because of it. Sometimes it beeps and they don't know why. We had an example of one person who received violations even though he was in the house. He was in an apartment building, and monitoring experts told us that sometimes those environmental factors of apartment buildings play a factor. Also, we have people who violate, hey, I worked a little late at work, or hey, I had to go get diapers for my son. So you never know when a violation is really going to affect your life.
Taylor Tiamoyo-Harris, you can find her byline in the New York Times. A very interesting story. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're back in a moment. If the measure of a society is not how it treats the powerful, but how it treats the powerless, then it's time to get out the measuring stick. Tonight, we check the record of a compelling court case that speaks not only to the fate of one man, but to the integrity of the entire judicial structure in which he found himself ensnared. Christopher Dunn was convicted in 1991 of killing a teenage boy, a court case built entirely on two young eyewitnesses. They later recanted under oath, saying police coerced their statements. There was no murder weapon, no forensic trace, not even a fingerprint. Nothing but a fading and fractured story. In 2020, a Missouri judge reviewed the case and said no reasonable juror presented with today's evidence would convict. At the time, the law only allowed relief for people like that were on death row. Well, that law has since changed. In 2023, under the new statute, the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office filed to vacate the conviction. A second judge reviewed that evidence and reached the same conclusion. Christopher Dunn was actually innocent. And yet Missouri's Attorney General Andrew Bailey is appealing. The Supreme Court, in a 4-3 narrow decision, said that appeal can move forward. Mr. Dunn, for now, is free, but not at peace. The Attorney General argues the state and not the local prosecutor holds the finality or final word in these convictions. That allowing prosecutors to correct a wrongful conviction without state interference somehow threatens institutional stability. This is an argument based not on justice, but on jurisdiction. Not on truth, but on turf. The AG says a prosecutor who once convicted someone cannot now advocate for that same person's innocence. But the very law, the Missouri Revised Statute 547.031, was written to allow exactly that. Prosecutors aren't static guardians of past convictions. They're stewards of an active justice. When new facts emerge, seeking to right a wrong isn't betraying their oath, it's their duty to uphold it. Bailey also claims the state is an aggrieved party here. But how is Mr. Dunn's exoneration injuring the state? It's the remedy of an injury, his wrongful imprisonment. To treat justice as something so fragile it can't survive a correction is to value permanence and power over principle. And while the AG warns that exonerations might erode public confidence, what would erode confidence more? Correcting a mistake or fighting to double down and reinstate one, despite two judges now saying the man is innocent? The notion that Mr. Dunn could be sent back to prison after all this isn't law, it's legalism. And legalism without justice becomes mere cruelty and possible control. Besides, who wins here? Not the public, not the victim's family, and certainly not Mr. Dunn, who's already lost 33 years. Let's be clear, this is not about whether the law allows for an appeal. It's about whether the law should ever be wielded in this way at all. The Attorney General does have that discretion, but inherent in discretion is the choice not to use it. In the end, any system which refuses to correct itself cannot command respect. It may command obedience, it may command fear, but never trust. Christopher Dunn's legal fight continues, but the larger trial The one testing Missouri's moral compass is already underway, and the jury is we the people. That's all of our time this week. We're back again at the same time next week. Until then, we're off the record.